Let's begin.
Scary Story Fanatics, welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. I was just going through this leather-bound book that Doughboy and I released a few years ago, and seems to me I've uncovered a new chapter. So sit back, relax. I call this one Dreamscape, the Prologue.
When Alicia opened her eyes, she wondered where she was. She failed to recognize the scenery outside the car's rear passenger window, the landscape foreign and strange. Almost as quickly as the large house loomed towering in the immediate landscape, did Alicia remember that today they were moving. Today her and her family were on their way to their new house, and she had fallen asleep in the car, having forgone witnessing the entire trip unfold before her, lost in blissful dreams, visions of candy and friends, as most children often do. As she situated herself, sitting upright in the back seat, the vehicle made its way down the house's long drive before parking just out front. Alicia outstretched her tiny frame, squeezing the weariness from her body, excited at the thought of exploring this old structure and its grounds. Her parents, both lost in conversation with one another, were first to exit the car, but Alicia was right behind them, leaping from its confines with such haste that she failed to shut the door behind her. "Stay close and be careful," her mother yelled as Alicia ran up the front steps and to the unlocked front door. She heard her mother, but was too focused on promises of adventure to acknowledge the receipt of her words. Weeks had passed since their day of arrival. There was enough space in Alicia's new bedroom for all of her toys, including her rocking horse. In an attempt to ease her transition, Alicia's parents even painted her room in a themed decor. Alicia loved the circus and all that it was associated with it. Thanks to her artistic mother, her room was now encompassed by a plethora of dancing clowns. Some on barrels, some on high wires, but all grinning in pleasure, laughter, and satisfaction. Alicia was used to life in the city, being confined to cell-like quarters and unable to just go outside and play unabated. Now, she had nearly free roam of the property, inside and out. There were woods to explore, nooks and crannies within the home as well, that offered intriguing elements of imagination to service, all of which were at the ready, awaiting her interest and attention. In fact, the only places that she wasn't allowed to go to was near the road, as it was dangerous, and into the cellar of that old home, also deemed too hazardous for a little girl. Alicia didn't understand why, but she was well behaved. She didn't need to understand. She did as she was told. Days progressed into weeks, and life continued for the small family as normal. Sure, the house was far too large for their needs, but Alicia's parents had plans for a bigger family eventually. For now, only 3 plates were set at the dinner table, and once called, Alicia happily ran down the stairs to take her place amongst her family. Mother had already populated the table with the main course and a few sides, and once the girl had scooched her seat in to present herself with her plate, her father began to make his entrance as well, holding his nose, as if something about the food had become unappealing. But it wasn't the meal. Suddenly and strangely, the house shook with a screaming growl and a loud, explosion-like boom that caused the family of 3 to raise their hands to their ears. Alicia screamed in terror. None of them had experienced anything like it before. As fast as the sound had come, it had gone. and if not for all three of them attesting to having heard the same thing, the event may have been chalked up to a hallucination or a trick of the mind. But no matter how much they conferred or attempted to explain the event away, no understanding was gained, and the rest of the evening was spent trying to calm Alicia down and out of near hysterics with fear. Although this was finally achieved, and the noise never returned, that smell of something faint and foul seemed to linger about the air, without source or end. Disembodied nothingness, colors like water, lights as if tangible, and then, finally, her living room. Things looked so different, and yet everything seemed familiar. She wasn't scared at first. In fact, she somehow felt comforted, as if something here welcomed her with open arms. Alicia entered through the archway leading in from the front entrance and stood in the center of the room, awaiting the voice again. Something soft, yet loud, echoed promises in her ears, begged for her companionship and the freedom from loneliness. She should have been scared. She should have been absolutely terrified to her core. There was an incorporeal presence in her home, speaking her name and calling to her for some unknown bidding. However, for reasons unknown to her, these events rang no warning bells, and Alicia called into the air, seemingly to nothing in particular, awaiting a response in the near black, flecked with faint sparkles of light. Whispers. Faint whispers crept into her ears, into her mind, from the left of where she'd been standing. Curiously, the girl turned her head in the direction of an ornate marble fireplace, dark and extinguished within, empty besides that of a mound of cold ashes. Yet, somehow, whatever called to her was emanating from that fireplace. Slowly, but without hesitation, the little girl crept over towards it and bent down once reaching it, plunging both hands deep into the black soot, as if something would be there. Something was there. Whatever it was, it felt rigid, rectangular, and small enough to hold. Alicia pulled it free, noticing that now the whispers had stopped, and stared down, almost endlessly, at what she now held in her hands. It was an old book, without title, and although seemingly in fine condition beneath the soot, the pages and cover had yellowed and cracked respectively, indicating age beyond conception. The outside of it felt sandy and rough to the touch. Alicia noticed as she gripped the edges of the outer cover and pried the book open, revealing its ancient contents. Almost all the pages were blank, with the exception of one that depicted runic text and images that scared the poor girl into nearly throwing the book. There were monsters with many wings, many mouths, and many eyes that all seemed to stare back out at her from within the pages. She motioned to throw the book on the floor when the whispering started once again, creeping directly into her cognition, hearing whatever it was, without sounds or words to be spoken. The dialect was incomprehensible to the child, and now, thoroughly confused, she slammed the book shut. Alicia screamed at the sight now standing before her, hidden a moment ago by the open pages of that queer tome. It was her mother, standing only feet before her, not saying a word, not blinking her wide, open eyes, but covered from head to toe in crimson. Alicia stood there, paralyzed from shock. Her mother screeched a howl, not in her own voice, but that of whatever boomed through the house earlier in its unearthly bellow. Alicia's blood ran cold as ice, facilitating a scream of terror that would have called a willing parent to her side, and passed out from shock, falling heavy and limp where she had stood upon the floor. Alicia awoke to a violent shaking, and upon opening her eyes, the plethora of new stimuli provided the young child with information on a new paradigm in which she would now endure, even if she couldn't explain any of it. The shaking was due to her father. He did in fact hear her scream and rushed to her aid, but the shock on his face was evident. Alicia heard his words, but they made no sense. "My God, what have you done? What have you done?" But these words made no sense. She hadn't done anything. Alicia watched her father turn and crouch down, inspecting something at his feet. Alicia pointed her gaze downward, but the sight she beheld was foreign to her. She'd never seen that much blood up close. She'd never seen a dead body, and had never witnessed her mother in such a lifeless, unmoving, and clearly uncomfortable position. And all these visuals led the girl into a state of shock, completely unaware that she herself was covered in blood, or that in her hands she held both the book from her dreams and a knife that had come from the kitchen. Alicia's father shouted at her to explain herself, why she had committed such a heinous act, but the girl just stood there, frozen in temporary paralysis, as she desperately tried to process all the information that she had now thrust upon her. Alicia's father stood upright and stepped towards his daughter, shaking the knife free from her hand and snatching the book from the other, wanting to see what it was she was holding more clearly. Although still in shock, Alicia was keenly aware of her father's instant change in disposition. He had gone from frantic and desperate to calm and apathetic in a fraction of a moment. The moment that he touched that book. She saw that book clearly now. It did not appear as cracked as she had dreamt it, or as old. Somehow the cover seemed slightly newer, less tattered, although still very old, its pages still yellowed. Alicia had now begun to realize where she was, becoming more aware the longer that her father had possession of this book. No matter how many times she desperately asked him why he was doing what he was doing, or what happened to Mommy, and all the rest a child of such traumatic events might convey, her father simply toiled away over the next few hours, placing that old book back within that extinguished, ornate marble fireplace, and boarding it up, concealing its presence completely. Sure, he had to use materials from around the house, destroying some walls and vinyl, but the job was soon done. Alicia got no answers to her questions when she was taken by the hand and escorted toward the kitchen and the cellar door. The cellar was dark and smelled of dirt and must. Alicia could hardly see a thing, but she remembered that she was to never come down here. Was she being punished? Was Daddy punishing her for what happened to Mommy? The small-framed girl began to pull and struggle against the tug of her father's grip, but the grasp of his hand was firm and unrelenting, and his face remained expressioned in apathy. The distant stare and utter uncaringness for her pleas of release truly disturbed her. Alicia screamed as she fought harder to get away than she thought possible, but it didn't matter. The blackness remained, and her screaming stopped. It had happened so quick, and under such a cloak of resolute darkness, that she never knew or understood that a stone had collided with the back of her skull, gripped in her father's hand. She never understood the reason for abstaining from the cellar, the reason being the chasmous maw of the well within, too dangerous for a child to play near. The edge around it was small, not being much more than a black crater in an otherwise dirt floor, uncovered and waiting to be fed. And fed it was, for Alicia was tossed within and would never realize her circumstances, the events surrounding her death. She wouldn't see her father break from his trance the instant he let her go, watching the frame of his little girl disappearing into the black void below. A father who didn't understand why he had done what he just had. A father unable to live with the pain of what he had done and the loss of his family. Alicia's father would join her, tipping forward and plummeting into the deep beyond, accompanying his wife and daughter in death. And yet, that old well endured as a testament to tragedy and loss, as well as an old book, walled up and waiting to be unearthed.
Well, that just goes to remind you, with every new beginning comes a new expected resolution. And with that, don't forget, there is still one exclusive story in this book that I have not narrated, the epilogue story. But if you liked this, or even just want more gore galore, make sure to return again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.